kind of froze there for a minute.
So Rod is down under at the moment. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. So he's kindly been up since about 3 a.m.
Yeah, bit early.
To do the talk. Yeah, give it up for Rod.
Cool. So let me know if you have trouble hearing me or seeing anything. Also, feel free to ask questions or while I'm talking. I don't know if I'll hear you very well, but we'll see how it goes. So this is a talk that I've been working on for some time called The Future of Node. And the idea is that Node has been around for around 6 years, and there are certain things that have emerged out of Node that we can see that define Node and will give us an insight into what the future holds, because we know the things now that are becoming important to Node development. Let me see if I can share my presentation screen with you. Can you see that? Is that working?
No, not yet.
No. Not yet.
Okay. Give it a second.
No.
Share your screen.
Let's see. Share screen.
There we go.
Okay, so if I do that, can you see that now?
No. We see you. We see you again.
So I can't do presentation. Can you see that?
No, just you, Rod.
Just you, Rod.
Is the presentation online somewhere?
Sorry?
Is the presentation online somewhere? We can have it.
No. Look, let me just do this.
Oh yeah.
You can see that, can you?
You see something?
It's loading.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not going to press that start button there. You can just watch it in Keynote here. No big deal. Let me just see if I can get some keys. Yep. So, is that good there?
Yeah.
Great. And I can see, I've got a little window with you guys there so I can see you. So feel free to interrupt and ask questions. I'll be happy to do that during it. And I'll stop at the end as well to have any questions and have a discussion if you want. So, the essence of Node is what I think Node has become, what we've discovered over the past 6 years, and the emergent properties that have come out of this platform. And there's 5 separate things that I think have arisen as the most important things for Node. So, that define Node. So the first is JavaScript on the server. Obviously, that's important. Asynchronous programming is obviously a key theme of what Node is. Module-driven development, which is not as obvious as it sounds now. I'll dig into that a bit later. Small core and a vibrant ecosystem. This is a value that has emerged, and more recently, new models in open source. Is something that's started to come out of the Node community. So I'll just dig into that. JavaScript on the server. So let's look at what this is about. So JavaScript on the server, it gives us this thing that is often referred to as developer joy. And if anyone, I presume a lot of you come from different developer backgrounds, whether it be Java or C++, C#, etc. A lot of us that come to JavaScript from these other platforms experience this thing of developer joy, that there's this productivity and there's this fun associated with the language. And I think part of it is that JavaScript itself is a fun language. It's kind of quirky, and that you can do crazy things with it. and it gives that sense of great feedback as you go. And I, as a Java programmer in the past, this is something that's very true for me. JavaScript is productive. If you come from a more verbose language, then you definitely experience this. And when coupled with Node, you get to do things really quickly. You can spin up servers really quickly, and you can get to a fully functioning project without very much boilerplate at all. So this is important. JavaScript is approachable, and that might not be totally obvious given that it has some quirks. So you think about prototyping programming, these things are a little bit hard to grok initially, but you don't have to understand some of the more advanced things about JavaScript. You can enter into it pretty quickly, so it is an approachable language. And there's a massive pool of developers as well. So I've got a chart here. I don't know how well this renders for you, but this was by Redmond. I think it was just a month ago they did this, or maybe 2 months. They looked at the popularity rank on Stack Overflow is up the x-axis there, along the y, and the x-axis is popularity rank on GitHub by number of projects. And they plotted this, and you can see at the top right, JavaScript right up there. That it really is one of the most popular languages out there. There are some estimates that put JavaScript as having way more developers out there in the wild than even its closest competitors. And part of this is because there's a lot of people out there that don't even consider themselves developers. They are using JavaScript for the web, they're copying and pasting snippets from Stack Overflow. They don't think of themselves as programmers until one day they wake up and realize that they're actually doing some really advanced things, and they can apply this in more advanced ways. So what does that mean for the future of Node? Well, JavaScript's not going away, as much as some would like it to. Dart hasn't really made a dent there at all. In fact, JavaScript's made a dent in Dart. And a lot of these other experimental additions are really struggling to make any traction. So JavaScript's here to stay. Node adoption makes JavaScript the true language of the web. So JavaScript is known as the language of the web, but when we put it on the server, it really is the language of the web because it can serve the back end and the front end. It just becomes this. And Node is helping to drive the future of JavaScript. So we're much more engaged in the process of defining the future, and we will be into the future. So as we get more involved in TC39, as we get more involved in the runtime, so V8, the more influence we as a community get to influence the future of JavaScript. And we already see that happening, where we're pushing back on certain features, or we are, parts of our community are pushing for other features. These things feed up into TC39, and we get to define the future of JavaScript. The only problem, I suspect, the only problem I'm a little bit wary of is that there will be challenges for learning as the language complexity increases. So ES6 and ES7 add a lot more features. They change the language a lot. And I think there's a little bit of a risk in the complexity increasing, which increases the difficulty of learning. And if you ever tried to learn C++, know a little bit of what it's like, because C++ is a beast where you can attack it from different angles, and it looks like something completely different. I have some fears that JavaScript is becoming where you'll have people using classes and then people using prototypes. You'll have people using arrow functions and people avoiding them. You'll have people using generators and promises and then other people not, and it will look like a totally different paradigm of programming. That's a little fear I have, but maybe that's unfounded. I have some people that like to tell me that they think that the additions to the language are actually simplifying it, and that new people won't have to learn so many of the complicated things about, what does this mean and what does prototype mean. Those things can be avoided fairly early in the learning process, but we'll see. So the next part is asynchronous programming, and you'll know what this is about, presumably. You're at a Node meetup, so it's probably not new stuff. But what does asynchronous programming do for us? Well, it's an alternative programming mindset. When you approach asynchronous programming, you have to think differently. You have to switch into a different mode that is not synchronous. You don't have execution in this 1-step, 2-step, 3-step. You have a much more fluid execution that jumps around according to outside influences. So we have an API focused on callbacks, events, and streams. There are limits to things you can do synchronously, and the things you can do are generally shown. So you'll know that using FS read file sync is probably something you should avoid if you can, because it has performance implications. And it's single-threaded, so we have a single-threaded platform, and I think this is actually a positive thing. I'll get into that in a moment, but you don't have the ability to use threads to construct your programs in a way that suits the way you think. You have to adapt the way you think to how the computer actually works. So another thing that it gives us is related to being single-threaded is actually a high-performance paradigm. We prioritize I/O in the platform, where everything that's I/O has to be treated as a special class. So you are forced to deal with I/O up front, and in the end, and the trade-off for that complexity is that you get high performance. And I'll just show you an example here, which is hopefully that comes out. You can see there's some Java. And if you look down this little Java program, it's like a Java version of cat. So it reads the file. It says it's reading the file. It opens the file. It creates this string builder object, and then it reads a line, and then each line it appends that to that string buffer, and then it prints that string buffer to console. Closes the file, and it says, I've finished reading the file. So it's just straightforward, nothing fancy here. But the catch here is that on every few lines, there's I/O happening. So you've got I/O on the first and second line. You've got I/O during the loop, and you've got I/O when you are printing it out. You've got I/O when you are closing the file, and then you've got I/O when you are printing to the console. And at no point are you prompted to think about that I/O except with the triangle. So as far as the programmer is concerned, each operation, each line is equivalent, whereas they are completely not equivalent. So assigning an object in memory or reaching into that memory. So if you look at the line section, read line section, it's just like that. This bit here where we're reading a file, we're reading a line, even it's buffered, so ignore the fact that it's buffered. We'll just pretend that each time you call this, it reads a line from the file. You are not prompted to think about the fact that each call to that is going to block the process, that the CPU is going to be doing nothing for this thread while it's waiting for that output. And then the next line, you're putting it into memory. That's extremely cheap compared to this reading line statement here, and there's no reason for the programmer to consider these to be separate things. They're just part of the bundle. Whereas if you think about what happens in Node to achieve this same program, every time there's I/O, except for the console logging, you are forced to deal with it. So opening a file, reading chunks from it, closing a file, these are all asynchronous operations, and you have to handle them especially. And there's a little bit of awkwardness involved in asynchronous programming, but in having that awkwardness, you're actually prompted to think about the costs of those things. So this is what I mean by it's a high-performance paradigm, performance comes free, because you are prompted to think about these things. So what does it give us? Well, it gives us scalability. Node is known for its ability to handle huge amounts of I/O with a single process. It can handle huge amounts of I/O with very little memory. due to the way that it handles streaming data and other forms of data handling. It can do so, it can orchestrate a large amount of I/O and do so very efficiently. The single-threaded paradigm also encourages scalable design patterns, because when we develop our Node applications, we know we're restricted to a single thread, and most of the computers we're deploying to use more than one thread, more than one CPU. So we know from the big thing we're going to have to multiply our processes. So we develop for that from the upfront, that our programs are going to be multiplied for scalability. And what that gives us is, as soon as we hit the single server barrier and need to go across to a second server, that's a trivial exercise of adding another server and multiplying processes. If you think about the normal practice with developing applications in more traditional platforms, you use threads to get around the problem of scalability, and then you tie yourself to a server, and you end up problems like sticky sessions. You need to stick a web session onto a particular server because you've built it in such a way that that server needs to know about that client. We don't tend to hear about those problems in Node because people design for these things up front, and I believe it's the platform that forces this. And asynchronous programming is also reflective of how the world really works. You think about your day-to-day interactions with the world, it's all asynchronous, and you have no control over the time it takes for these external events to happen. They just happen, you have to react to them. So it's very reactive, and that's reflected in our platform. So I think it's an ideal model. As uncomfortable it is for some of us to switch from thinking about serial programming or synchronous programming, it's actually a better effect of how the world really works. So for the future of Node, I see there's an ongoing battle for programming paradigms, and we see this already, that we've got promises, generator functions for async, and then in ES7 there's this new feature called async, new keywords there that will be introduced, and these are all about trying to deal with asynchronous programming in a way that makes it look more synchronous or more serial. And each of these things is an attempt to do that. If you think about the way the generator functions are used, particularly where you invert the generator pattern and can then invoke functions as if they're serial, but they're actually asynchronous. This is what they're all trying to achieve. And into the future, we're going to see this more of a battle going on about how best to represent asynchronous programming. And I certainly don't see any particular thing here winning out just yet. And I suspect there's going to be some battles between those who want to embrace the new features and those that say, well, our old things have worked for us until now, so they're good enough. So that'll be interesting. Module-driven development. So this one is this is important because this was really an emergent property of the platform. That it wasn't obvious at the beginning that this is what Node was all about. That Node was just a way of running JavaScript on a server. So module-driven, let's define it. Our tools, specifically NPM, give us the ability to solve most dependency help problems that are experienced in other platforms. So if you think about dependency resolution and conflict management in dependencies, these things are hell in platforms where you can't have side-by-side different versions of the same package. The way that Node does it means that we can have extremely complex dependency hierarchies and very little need to solve conflicts, because conflicts don't happen very often in the kind of hierarchies we build. And it gives us simplicity as well. So module-driven development means that we can split off our separate concerns into separate modules, and we have much more simple components of our programs. Decoupled programming and reusable coding is the holy grail was one of the holy grails of computer science, and module-driven development gets us there. I think I'm not suggesting that Node is the ultimate in module-driven development, but Node certainly gets us much closer to this decoupling and reusable code than a lot of other platforms do. And I think Node is a statement to the future, and whatever comes next has to improve on Node. So module-driven development, we get to develop in small chunks of code, and we get much more focused concerns. So we split our modules into concerns. That makes them full. It makes them understandable just by reading them. You can open up a module and know what it does by reading it, unless it's cute. But the idea is that they should be small and understandable. You can document them as separate concerns. You can share them and you can collaborate around them. So the whole the essence of this is that you have these much smaller components where the actual code that does the work is a small component of the module, and you have a lot of work that goes into documentation and tests that go around it. And you wouldn't see this in a programming style where everything goes into one. You don't tend to see little clusters of tests around individual functionality, around every bit of functionality, and documentation around that. Whereas in Node, we're driven to find these reusable components and make them reusable. And this is a great example here. I don't imagine you can see this very well on the screen, but on the right-hand side there, you've got this is I think the rank of this module currently in terms of downloads on NPM is, I think it's 174. So it's 174th most download module on NPM. And it fits in the page here. And it's called Archi. And all it does is print out to the console a hierarchy of things. And the idea for this particular style came from NPM itself. And now NPM uses this module, so when NPM install and gives you that little printout of what's installed, it uses this module to do that printing out. It fits on a page, it has got tests that take up way more lines of code than the actual module itself. The documentation is the same, it takes up way more lines of documentation than the code. And this thing is reusable, so I've used this thing for things that are completely unrelated to dependency hierarchies. It's reusable. People collaborate around it for all the different purposes they have. This is ideal Node style module development. And the reason that I'm saying that this is an emergent property is because it wasn't obvious up front that this would be a key part of Node. That if you look at the history of the NPM client itself, it was a monolith, and it still is something of a monolith. And it wasn't until a few years into Node that this practice of breaking things into small modules started to emerge, and Substack was one of the key drivers of that, obviously, and that pattern then fed back into the platform. NPM itself started to be broken apart into small components, but it's hard to do that in the reverse of an application, but NPM is trying to be more modular these days. But this is a reason, a core thing that when we do Node, this is how we do Node. We do it in small modules. So if we look at the history of the recent history of programming, the 2000s to 2010, sort of prime time for big internet software, was also the golden era of the software monolith. So big businesses built big internet companies, and they had massive stacks that were monolithic. So a single application would run that company. And my favourite example of this is PayPal, where during this period, and from their beginning, PayPal was a single application. That was just a massive Java application. And that was typical of the time, because we thought we had all these ways of dealing with that. But then from about 2010 onwards, service-oriented architectures became much more the rage, and we wanted to break our monoliths up into services. And more recently, the term that's come around is the great unbundling. So companies all around the world are pulling apart their software monoliths, turning them into services, and with Node, you also decompose those services into modules. So this unbundling is a process of pulling apart the stack. It's pulling apart the code base, separating the concerns and making much more focused development, which gives us the agility we need as well. So the future of Node, with regard to module-driven, NPM is going to be increasingly focused on module-driven development. It's a key part of Node, and NPM will continue to make sure that that is made easy and frictionless. There's probably going to be some new interesting functionality that NPM will introduce to make this even more easy. And even things like scoped packages and the private modules, those kinds of things go towards this module-driven development where it's easing the friction of doing this modularity. We're going to see more service-focused infrastructure libraries. So, service-oriented architectures. We want these things. We put out into small services. And Nearform, for example, are focusing on microservices, and they've got their own service-focused infrastructure libraries. So this is a key theme that's going to be continuing to the future with Node, where there'll be more and more tools in our ecosystem to do service-oriented architectures. There's going to be continued evolution of versioning conventions. I don't think that Semver is the ultimate in versioning. It's the best we have. I'm not knocking it, but I think it's better to come. And I think we're going to have continued discussion about how to deal with version with these complex hierarchies. And also, in the same vein, there's going to be continued discussion and evolution in how we think about transitive dependency problems. So, with very rich and deep dependency hierarchies, we get all sorts of new problems that we haven't really had to think about in the past, where dependency versions will shift between deployments. And between, you'll test your application with one set of dependencies, and then you do an npm install later, and you get a completely new set just because of how our versioning ranges work. So this is a problem that's becoming more and more acute, and we're going to have to have better ways of thinking about it and dealing with it. We're going to see more work on module-driven development for the browser. Already this is, we've got a browser client, we've got NPM trying to stomp out the plague that is Bower. And all these other tools that have attempted to make module-driven development in the browser work. It's an unsolved problem. It's a mess. There's lots of competing approaches, and that just means that there's going to be some interesting activity in this work in the coming years. And then is the ES6 module, bringing modularity to itself. How do we bring that into Node? Will be an interesting thing.
Sorry.
So the next part of the
question, Ron.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just wondering. You mentioned you think the browser module situation isn't solved yet. In what way do browser-defined Webpack not solve it? I mean, they seem fairly good to me. Like. So I don't want to suggest that they don't solve it, but if you look at the fact that they are not widely embraced, suggests that it's not solved. So the fact that Bower exists should tell you that this is not a solved problem. Like, why does Bower exist when NPM exists? It's a substandard subset of NPM, and yet it was embraced so much more widely by the front-end development crew than NPM. It's like we as server-side people love NPM, and we think everyone should use it, but Bower was chosen as the sort of de facto standard here. Why? And why is it so pervasive? So I'm not saying that those tools are not ideal, it's just that, I think they might be, but the people that are doing a lot of this work don't seem to think they are. So that's the point here, that there's something not clicking here, whether it's a cultural thing or whether it's actually a tooling thing, I don't know, but it's absolutely not solved because nothing has won. I don't know, I think it's just a matter of time, really, because to an extent, things like browser-defined Webpack and using NPM for the client side they're still relatively new, and there's a lot of people who were building web applications years ago before they could, for instance, even use Node.js in banks or whatever. So it's just a matter of time. I'm a client person, and I totally agree with you. Bower is not a proper solution. But I have, it takes time for us to move all our clients forward and move everyone forward. So
my main entry point to Node, so I came from JavaScript on the front end. I'm not a front ender, but that was my entry point to Node, doing JavaScript on the front end, like most people. But my main entry point into Node was through a project called Ender. Now, I don't know if anybody here remembers Ender. It's pretty much died off now, but I became heavily involved in that project. Ender was around before Browserify. And Ender, the reason I was attracted to Ender was because it did modularity for the browser. You could use NPM, it would bundle them up into a distributable, and voila. But it lost out to Browserify. Browserify did it much better and allowed it to do it much deeper. And now we have Webpack. Why do we have Webpack, and why is Webpack getting so popular? The point here is not that we don't have the tools. It just seems to be that the tools don't seem to be addressing everybody's problem that well. And I think we're still doing that evolution thing. Just the fact that we're having this discussion about whether Webpack is better than Browserify points to that. That's my point here.
Okay, fair enough.
I want this to be a solved problem. I think it is.
I think it is a solved problem. I think Browserify and Webpack have solved this.
Sorry?
I think Browserify or Webpack, they both solve the problem. I think it is. I don't think it's a big deal that there's two of them. It's not a major issue. I mean, Instagram, Pete Hunt has talked about Instagram moving from Browserify to Webpack. It took them a day. It's not crippling to move between the two. As a developer, the mental space and the way you think about code is still basically the same. It's not. Yeah.
Maybe it's just a evangelism or education thing. I don't know. Recently on Twitter, Nicholas Zakis, I think it was, did an informal survey about whether people are using modular build systems for front end or whether they're using nothing at all. And he got a surprising high proportion of people that are using nothing, that they're just still bundling their JavaScript files individually. I don't know what the hold-up is. I don't know why people are embracing these things. It could just be that they add a layer of complexity to something that it has been traditionally fairly simple, maybe. And then the other complicating factor is going to be HTTP 2, which is supposed to make it okay to distribute many files. So when HTTP 2 becomes more pervasive, are we going to see pushback on the idea of bundling everything into one file? That I think there's an ongoing discussion there. Let's move on though, because I don't want to talk about graphs. They're terrible. Small core vibrant ecosystem. This is a core value that we've embraced with Node, and we now push it everywhere. Those of us that are close to Node hold this dearly and push it all over the place. So let's define it. Node's core contains most of the essentials, and there's constant debate about what gets in. There's the gatekeepers to Node core that protect it from feature bloat. And this is a great thing, I think. Node's modularity in NPM enables a vibrant ecosystem. The way we can do development lets us push this experimentation to the edges. So when people want features, you can say, well, why does that need to go to core? Just do it on NPM and experiment with it. Compete with others that want to do something similar. There can be a Browserify and a Webpack. There can be multiple different implementations of the same idea, and that competition is really important. Somebody once said, and Kenneth Reed, I think this was in a presentation, so it's not, I can't link to it, but he said that the standard library is where modules go to die. That was in relation to Python, the Python standard library, which has some things in it that I think that they regret now, but that's just the nature of standard libraries. You put things in there, you can't get rid of them. You have to either fix them or add new versions of them. So you have these awkwardly versioned core modules. We don't like this in Node, and we're trying to push back on it. So it means that we're not stuck with as many bad parts. You think of some of the bad parts that now we have in Node core. One of them is domains. Another one, maybe contentiously, is streams 2, which was sort of doing streams better, but not really compatible with streams 1. Now we've got streams 3, which is a mashup of streams 1 and 2 that does it better. So we've got this in-between version of streams that, there's now technical debt in the streams 3 implementation, so we can't really get rid of it. And you can insert your own pet hate Node core feature in there as technical debt, as something that we're stuck with. But the fact is that we have fewer of these things. There's not many of these things. We can list them on a single hand. And you can't say that for many other languages, even if they were the Chinese Node. This is great. There really is fewer things to hate. So it lets us experiment. Pushing it into the ecosystem lets us experiment and compete. We have different build tools, as an example, Gulp, Broccoli, and then the browser build tools as well, like Browserify, Webpack, Ender, others. These things are competing for mindshare. But the LevelDB ecosystem, which is flourishing, and the reason it can flourish is that its pace and its ideas are completely detached from core, so that whole ecosystem can experiment by itself. The StackGL ecosystem is an interesting one if you haven't looked at it. This is WebGL components in NPM. Tiny components of WebGL, a bit like 3.js, but unbundled into small components. So that's an interesting ecosystem that is happening off to the side. You've got desktop application tooling like NWJS, formerly known as Node WebKit, and Atom, now known as, what is it, Electron? Electron is the core thing. So that these things exist in the ecosystem and can compete. You've now got IoT and robotics. There's stuff flourishing, you don't even have to be aware of it. And even things like languages and language features. You can have something like CoffeeScript exist in NPM and be experimented with and iterated on and forked into literate CoffeeScript and iced coffee and whatever else they want to do. TypeScript is another example. So the future of Node, with regard to this, core is going to be more fiercely guarded. I think we're going to see fewer examples of things like domains, because we're so much more embracing this idea of keeping core small. So core is going to be fiercely guarded into the future. It will expand, but I think it'll be very measured. It probably means we'll have difficulty adapting core to new language features. We're already seeing this with discussions around promises. So some of the new language features that are coming up actually rely on promises, and with Node core being very callback oriented, there's likely some friction there. So to take advantage of some of the new language features, we may have to adapt some of the core to fit that. That'll be kind of interesting in the next couple of iterations of ECMAScript. There's going to be ongoing tension with V8's expansion. V8 doesn't embrace this idea of small core. The whole Chromium project is just one big monolith, and they like throwing things into it. So V8's expansion is real. We're seeing it now with their implementation of this thing called strong mode, that is like strict mode on steroids, basically forcing you to write what looks like Java. And SoundScript is a new experiment of theirs, which is based on TypeScript. They're going to put this into the runtime. And an interesting one is this INTL object that is available in browsers now, and is available in Node 0.12, but it's not available in IOJS. And the reason is because there has been conflict over the fact that this is a monolithic component that's been stuck into core. We can't remove it, we can't stick it into NPM and keep it out of core. We have to bundle it just because of the way that V8 deals with this object. So it's kind of annoying, and that gives us tension with V8 because they do things differently the way we want to do it. And then we'll see improved support for username extension. So we've got Nan helping you with writing C++ add-ons. We're seeing some interesting work going on right now with adding features that give us a proper FFI interface, so foreign function interface, something like that. So that lets you write your add-ons in JavaScript, but you can interact with the system as if you were writing C++. So there's some work going on there at the moment, so that'll be interesting to watch. So lastly is this idea of new models in open source, something I'm pretty passionate about, and I'll explain what this means. This comes from the fact that Node is a new beast in open source. It was born in the GitHub era. Node doesn't know Stack Overflow. That was the previous era. Node was born in the GitHub era and it's pushing at the boundaries of the GitHub era now. So many projects are adopting liberal governance. We've got even IO.js and Request. Request is the fourth most downloaded library on NPM, and the whole level ecosystem adopt this idea of much more open source, where the governance is very liberal, the contributorship is very open, and you're invited into a discussion and a collaboration rather than having these walled gardens of code. And this is getting into core, so it's happened with IO.js, and now we're seeing, as the foundation emerges, this same idea of openness is coming to Node core. Contributors are embraced as owners, so Request as a great example. Michael moved that out of his GitHub account into a new organization called Request. So you now have to go to GitHub/request/request to get to it. And he started adding collaborators to the project who were submitting pull requests and fixed bugs. And he basically gave them shared ownership of the project. And that turned it into a much more vibrant project. I didn't have a graph that I probably should have put up here. It was interesting about Request. The Request sort of started to stagnate because Michael had moved on, fixing bugs is kind of hard, isn't it? But he started to open it up, and new people started to take over the project and started closing bugs, closing issues, merging features, fixing things, and the activity really spiked in Request. So that's really reinvigorated that project. And having small modules actually makes this easier. It's much easier to give up control or share control of something that is small. You don't have as much invested in it. So I can add collaborators to my module that is only one file big, knowing that if they screw up, then there's not either an alternative in NPM, or I could fork it, or I could rewrite it, or whatever. Like it's not that much overhead. It's not that much emotional attachment to our code. So the Node community, I think, is more embraced and cohesive because of this. I know, we have our arguments on Twitter, particularly, but I think the Node community is very embracing, and it's partly to do with this idea of how we approach open source now. And learning and upskilling of people who get involved is accelerated by the responsibility we give them. So it's amazing what happens when you give somebody responsibility. They have to level up. They have to really step up to the plate. They can't just sit on the sidelines and complain. They're now part of the problem, and they become responsible for fixing it. And also making sure that their level of skill is appropriate as well. So I love this process of watching people really step up when you give them that responsibility. The future of Node, it simply, I think, is open governance from the core up. Node core through IO.js and through the foundation is going to be much more open. And I think that means that Node is pioneering new governance models for the next generation of open source. So it's easy to think that with Git and with GitHub that we had achieved the ultimate in open source, but it's not true. It's just the next step in the evolution of what open source means, and there will be something next. There will be a new GitHub that has something much more compelling, and I think the trajectory is towards openness, and Node is pioneering that, where code is treated with much less reverence. It's treated like, my ideal is for a version of GitHub that is much more like Wikipedia, where there's an openness, where people's contributions are embraced, that we don't have these strict walls around contribution and strict divisions between people. I think Node is pushing towards this, and I'm excited about the potential future here. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I'm hopeful. So finally, the future of Node is we can say this now, is found in Node.js. If you haven't been aware of this, then you must have been hiding under something, because it's been around. There's a fork of Node that's been around since November, and even though it's not heavily adopted in production, it's definitely driving the future of Node. And it's now literally becoming the future of Node under the foundation. And why is this? Well, Node as a thing is moving faster than Node.js as a core, as a runtime. So Laurie posted this. He works with NPM. This was on, he posted this a couple of months ago, I think it was. So there'd be an updated version of this. This is even more dramatic. This is NPM. We see the blue line is the number of packages published, and the red line is the number of packages downloaded. And those are wild trajectories. It's just amazing. And NPM now, just as of a couple of days ago, is now, I think, the biggest language code repository or package repository in the world. So it overtook, it's overtaken Maven and CPAN and all the others now. So it is literally huge. And this just points to the fact that the ecosystem is moving faster than the core. And this is core. This is the joined Node project. This is the number of commits per month. And the peaks are, the last peak, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but that was around Node 0.10's release. And since then we've had this really sad down trajectory leading off towards oblivion. And so IAJS comes along and does this, where the new peak is higher than any of the previous peaks in terms of the number of commits. It may not be the best metric to talk about the health of a project, but it's a proxy. So this just shows this pent-up desire to move things along, to get progress again. So the future of Node is Node.js plus IOJS. We're seeing this in the foundation now. The two projects are coming together. There is a convergence work going on where there's a new repository on GitHub. If you go to github/node.js/node, that's a convergence of the two. That takes IOJS as the base, and it is picking through the additions in Node 0.12 and late Node 0.10 that were not pulled across Node.js, and it's deciding what should go in and in what form, and that will eventually take over as the new Node.js. IOJS gives us open governance, rapid iteration, and new relationships with the V8 team. We're seeing new dialogues with this team now where we get to push back on their absurdities, but we also get to help fix their bugs. We get to help drive their features and the way that they implement things. And IOJS generally embraces the future. So as painful as it might be, IOJS looks at what ES6 and ES7 might mean for the platform. I might skip that one and just talk about the Node Foundation. So Node Foundation, both projects have agreed to join. It is adopting the IOJS governance model, particularly for collaborators and governance of the code base. There's continuing releases of IOJS and Node.js for now, so we will see more 0.12 releases, we will see more IOJS releases, and then there's work on this converted version as the repo there. And then that will eventually take over as the new Node.js. And we'll see maintenance of some of the old releases. 0.10 is not going to stop being supported anytime soon. Neither is 0.12, and IOJS will see some maintenance as well. And then this new version of Node will be the latest hotness. We're going to see an LTS strategy. Large companies are going to be behind pushing the stability of certain branches of releases. So we will see, even though we might have rapid iteration and version numbers might increase, we might see releases all the time, we will have LTS branches that so long-term support where you can pick a release and have a guarantee by the people that are doing the work that they will be supporting it for X number of months. So it won't be as crazy as it looks. You won't have to be downloading a new version every week. You will be being able to say, I'm going to use this LTS version, and I know it will be supported for this many months, and it will get fixes. So that's the new style of releases. So future of Node, Insta-free, bloody brilliant. And that's all from me. I don't know, maybe I went a bit over time there, but are there any questions?
Rod, is there any kind of timeline for when we'll have the merged version of Node? Is there any kind of guess?
I would say within probably 2 months. You can go to that repository now and look at the issue list, and there's a bunch of outstanding questions about certain features or commits that don't fit in by default, and there's discussion about those. But there's nothing particularly controversial there. The biggest controversy is the INTL object that Node 0.12 embraced, but IOJS didn't explicitly. But it was agreed by IOJS that wouldn't be. That they wouldn't let that stand in the way of the version. So the INTL object's going in, and it would be a matter of making it better. So the going out there is just little awkward things about changes that were made in 0.12 don't quite fit in. How do we fit them in? Do we even fit them in? And they're fairly simple. So I would say that will settle down very soon, and we will start to see experimentations with getting pre-releases out, and then we might see a Node.js version 4 or 5, it'll probably be within the next couple of months.
Okay. Just a follow-on question from that. Do you know if this merged version will be backwardly compatible with version 12 or 0.12?
For the most part, it will. There will be, so it still will be a Semver major bump, because Semver major is breaking changes. The main breaking changes will be in the V8 C++ API. So native add-ons are not going to be directly compatible if they're only compatible with 0.12. So there will be some pain in native add-ons, and that's unavoidable thanks to V8 and their crazy API development practices. There's a couple of minor breaking changes as well that have been introduced in IOJS that will make it into the new node, and they're things like very small things like the URL paths. The URL object you get has changed its properties from not all of them, sorry. I think it's the href property that's been changed to a getter and setter rather than a property, and that's a breaking change, but pretty much no one uses that in the way that it would be breaking. Another example is when you do os.tempdir, you will consistently get a slash on the end. So they're really small breaking changes, but they are breaking because the ecosystem is so huge and people use these things in various ways. So they will break the subcode. It's just the portion of people modules that they break. So backward compatible in the sense that most Node programs and modules will just run, but breaking in the sense that native add-ons will have problems and there will be tiny little edge cases.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yep. That the C++ API thing will hopefully be dealt with within the next few weeks or the next month because there's an IO.js release that's due to come out, version 3, that contains most of the breakage that we're going to see. So we're going to see pressure within the next few weeks for all of the native add-ons in NPM to upgrade to support this new API. And that'll be done in a backward way because people still want their add-ons to be compilable on Node 0.10, some even Node 0.8. But they still have to do some work to make it forward compatible and backward compatible. But when that's done, I suspect a lot of the native add-ons in NPM will already be ready for the next release of Node.js.
Are you going to go back to bed, Rod? Are you up for the day?
I'm going to go back to bed because I have to get up and drive 3 hours to go down the coast and give another talk, actually. I haven't planned my day very well. Okay, well, thanks for having me, folks.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thank you very much, Rod.
Thanks again, Rod.
Great to see you, Rod.
It's great. It's been great to be in there. I haven't been your way for a couple of years now.
Yes, come back.
And, I'd love to come back soon.
Come back.
No, I will. It's just it takes like more than 30 hours to get there. Anyway, I might move on and I'll let you move on to Dan. I'm sure you've got some other things to talk about.
All right.